Canada's food system has some unique attributes, including being dominated by a handful of large players. Sylvain Charlesbois is Senior Director of the Agri-food Analytics Lab at Dalhousie University. Thanks for being with us, Sylvain.
My pleasure.
So how much of our food inflation is about a lack of competition in Canada?
Well, we always need more competition, no matter what. That's the reality of our economy. Really, we need more competition all the time. The challenge with grocers, in particular in Canada, is not like they're profiteering and gouging, if you will, consumers. They're actually putting a lot of pressure on processors. So they're really putting they're pushing suppliers way more. And so yes, there's some abuse within the supply chain, but for reasons that are not necessarily mentioned all that much. So what's going on right now is that grocers are charging extra fees here and there. They send out letters all of a sudden, and manufacturers have to absorb those extra costs. Well, what happens essentially is that they increase prices, which brings more volatility to the marketplace. So prices that you and I see at the grocery store are influenced by that cat and mouse game up the food chain. Gross margins have remained the same for several years for grocers, and gross margins are a good metric to assess profiteering. It's revenues minus the cost of goods. That has not changed, but the abuse of the food chain has changed in the last few years.
Will the new Grocers Code of Conduct, which we think is coming this year, make a difference?
I don't know. I hope it will. By design, it should fix some of the issues that I just mentioned. Less abuse, but the problem, Amanda, is that I did see draft number 1 a few years ago, and now we're up to draft number 11, which is now being implemented. And draft 11 is not as authoritative. It's not giving the Bureau, the Office of the Code of Conduct, tremendous power. No fines, no sanctions. So it's a wait and see thing, really. We'll see whether or not Loblaw, Walmart, or the grocers will actually follow the rules and follow the decisions made by the office.
What role could government play, Sylvain, in the food system?
The government's role is to enable conditions that would increase investments. That's basically it. A few years ago, I was working with Minister Champagne, who was carrying the portfolio of innovation at the time, and he wanted to invite Aldi and Lidl and other grocers to come into the Canadian market. But that's not how it works. They have to recognize potential, market potential. A few weeks ago, Aldi coincidentally announced that it was opening 180 more stores in the US, in addition to the 2,700 that they already have in the US. Not a peep about Canada. Why? Because right now, Canada's economy is, well, sluggish. Really, it's moving sideways, and there's just, if you're in the business of feeding stomachs, that's not a good thing to watch. And so we need a stronger economy to increase competition. Ironically, Loblaw, so TNT, which is owned by Loblaw, is going south, is opening stores in the US, but it's not happening the other way around.
Thanks so much for being with us, Sylvain.
My pleasure.
Sylvain Charlesbois is Senior Director of the Agri-food Analytics Lab at Dalhousie University. To help offset the rising cost of food, the feds have increased an existing GST credit for some 12 million Canadians. Lisa Bishop-Spencer is Executive Director of the Canadian Centre for Food Integrity. Lisa, will the GST credit make much of a difference?
So we see this as a step towards achieving these goals. First, by providing immediate financial supports for families and community supports like food banks. But really, what this shows is recognition. Food is being treated as essential infrastructure now and not just a household expense. So, when governments step in to protect access to food, it reflects how central the food system is to the economy and social stability.
Where does food affordability fit into the overall economy?
Well, it begins with how Canadians experience food. So, our public trust research suggests that food affordability has consistently ranked number one among Canadians' life challenges. And when food feels harder to afford, it doesn't just affect budgets, it affects confidence. It affects whether people see the system as working for them. So when confidence weakens, the system itself becomes fragile, which is why food affordability, food security, innovation, trust, those things can't be separated. It really, if food feels insecure, it becomes harder to afford. If it feels unaffordable, trust starts to erode. And then when trust erodes, the system becomes less resilient.
Some food prices are rising because of really big picture issues like climate change that can make it feel hard to tackle.
I think it's important to understand that right now, our public trust research is showing that overall concern about climate issues has softened over the last year. So it's an opportunity right now for the sector to step up and tell the stories and demonstrate the moves that it's taking to really address a lot of those climate concerns before it becomes a major concern again.
What do you mean when you talk about resilience in the food system?
I think it's important for people to understand the system and how it works, right? We saw in the pandemic how damaging logistics can be. So increased costs at each point can ultimately show up in prices. So there's not one switch that anyone can control in terms of food prices, and they're influenced by many parts of the system working together. So what we see is that when farmers and manufacturers and retailers and governments and all of the people involved in the food system are a part of that same ecosystem, that creates longer term resilience that comes from collaboration across the entire value chain.
We are, of course, it seems more concerned these days with being independent when it comes to our food. How is that playing out?
I think so. In the Canadian context, food sovereignty refers to our capacity to produce its food for our own population. But we also need to understand that it doesn't necessarily reflect complete self sufficiency or the absence of trade. So our food system is really deeply connected, interconnected with global supply chains. And Canadians really benefit from imported ingredients and international markets. So food sovereignty, food security, they're very closely linked. And when Canadians believe that the country has the ability to produce its food domestically, reliance on global systems is experienced more as a strength than a vulnerability.
Lisa, how important is a clear resolution on our trade agreement with the U.S. this summer?
There's no doubt that those trade negotiations are incredibly important to the food system as a whole.
Thanks so much for being with us, Lisa.
Thank you.
Lisa Bishop-Spencer is Executive Director of the Center for Food Integrity. Coming up, how red tape adds up at the checkout. Stay with us.